Welcome to Knife Chats. If you like this video, please take a moment to leave a comment. Thank you.
Welcome back to another episode on the Swiss Master series by Colonial. Today I will be looking at the one that is normally just called a utility knife. However, many of the packages actually refer to all of them as just a utility knife. This is the one that has 5 implements on it, and depending on what year it was made, it will have this funky blade that is supposed to be a reamer, which kind of looks like a very short Warncliffe blade, or it will have a proper reamer, depending on if it was an early one or a later one. And this was a very early one, and you can tell by this cross on here, which led to them being contacted by Victorinox and being told basically to cease and desist. As you can tell, this is an earlier Victorinox cross, and even the later Victorinox crosses kind of resemble this first cross that Colonial was using in their Swiss Master series, and it changed to the Cross of Lorraine. These were made in the late 60s, early 70s, I believe, and this one here is right there near the end in the late 80s, early 90s. Besides that reamer blade, you have your Spearmaster blade, and then on the back side you have the claw type can opener and the cap lifter screwdriver. And then on the back side you have a corkscrew. And you notice it's kind of a lazy corkscrew. You really have to push it back into place. And those are the blades that you have on them. It doesn't matter which year you're getting it from. Same blades on both knives. And it did not really change. These actually pop off so the bail can be removed. But this was the utility knife. And when it comes to Victorinox knives, which ones does this most closely resemble? Well, that's easy. The Spartan. Let's look at it real quick. You've got a can opener here, cap lifter screwdriver here, got a main spear blade, then you've got a pin blade, and then the back tools you have here are a corkscrew and a reamer. And you also have the other tools for the scales, such as the toothpick and the tweezers. And we know the none of the Swiss Master knives have the toothpick or tweezers. But that's the knife that this one is trying to, the utility knife is trying to mimic. The big difference between it, obviously, is this one has this kind of a reamer that might also act as a blade, but it does not have a true secondary pen blade on it. It just has the Spearmaster blade. And if you notice, the tools are in opposite order. Instead of having the can opener and cap lifter up front, it has those on the back side or on the back of the tools. And if you notice on the back here, you only have the corkscrew on the bottom and no reamer there, yet you have 3 layers as opposed to 2. And that's because the Swiss Army knives use that asynchronous floating back spring, whereas this has a solid back spring that is pinned in the middle. And so it has the corkscrew mounted here, and it is really just held in place by friction. It is not working off of a spring at all. This just has a short spring here for the reamer or this blade. And then you have the other tools working off of the other 2 blades. So I'm sorry, off of the other 2 springs. So the middle blade, the spear blade, is working off of this middle spring, and then you have your cap lifter and can opener working off of the back blade, back spring here. So it's a thicker knife, with less function than a Spartan. So obviously the Spartan is a much better knife on a number of for a number of reasons. One of them being it has an extra blade. Of the Swiss Master Series knives, I believe this is probably the one I find the least appealing. It's bigger than it needs to be. The corkscrew is very flimsy. Let's look at it compared to the corkscrew on a Spartan. You see how thick that one is on the Spartan versus this one. And if we look at this one was used a little bit. And if you can tell, it's all bent out of shape and everything. So, and that's really what will happen with it once it's been used a bit. Doesn't close correctly or anything. So this is probably the least appealing knife in the Swiss Master series, but it is also the one that you're going to find the most often. And I think that's because when they were not using the Sportsman, they were using this one in the line. I'm not sure if Colonial used this pattern of a knife in any other series they had. The only place I've ever seen it is in the Swiss Master series. However, I do know that Imperial Schrade also made a knife that is almost identical to this knife that appeared in the Matterhorn series and in the Diamond Edge series. I do not have a copy of it in the Matterhorn series, but I do have a couple copies of it in the Diamond Edge series. So what I'm going to do is look at the ones in the Diamond Edge series, and this is the older one that appears in it, and you can tell because of the angled punch. But it has the identical blades that you find in the Colonial. The difference is the Diamond Edge series is made in Ireland. And you see the cap lifter screwdriver, and then the can opener, and the bail. Now, like I said, this is the older one, so let's look at the older one here. And if you notice, same number of back springs, but with the corkscrew. Here's the corkscrew on the Diamond Edge. Here's the corkscrew on the Colonial. And even in the Diamond Edge series, the corkscrew is more substantial. And actually, it does have a little bit of a snap to it. And also you can see that with the wood-handled scales, it just looks better. The Diamond Edge is looking nicer too. The blades are about the same. I believe they're all 420, but the overall finish of this is just nicer than the one you see in the Colonial line. Now let's look at the newer version. So the later version of the Diamond Edge, here we have the reamer that they're using on here, and it's almost like a Wharncliffe blade, but it does have a nice pointy tip and got a very good edge on it. So if nothing else, you've got a Wharncliffe blade that can also act as a reamer versus the kind of a sheep foot blade. So you can see the difference in the reamer blades that they have. This one just looks a lot more practical and a lot more useful. Otherwise, the blades are the same. You have your nice spear blade, and then your cap lifters and your screwdrivers, all that are the same, as you see on the Colonial. Again, the Diamond Edge series has a nicer finish to it. It still has the wood scales. The corkscrew remains a little more substantial than what you find on the Colonial. Actually, by now it's looking a whole lot more substantial and works a whole lot better. The Colonial was always made in the United States. The Diamond Edge series was made in Ireland. This one is still made in Ireland, you'll see that. But all in all, it's just a much better finish, and just as a more solid built knife. So for the same price as what you were getting in the Colonial, I would have gone with the Imperial Diamond Edge over the Colonial utility knife. In this one, even though the corkscrew is not as handy as you would like, this blade actually is more useful than that sheep put on the other one. So you can use it as a reamer. You could also use it as a Wharncliffe blade for whittling and stuff. So just an all-around better knife than the Colonial. So that's almost like strike two on the Colonial. The Diamond Edge was better. The Spartan is definitely better. So this knife was very weak as far as I was concerned. So in my opinion, this is the weakest knife in the Colonial Swiss Master series, and unless you're just trying to collect the entire series, there's really no reason to even bother picking up this knife. The Diamond Edge is a much better knife. The one in the Matterhorn series would be a much better knife. But if you're dead set on the Colonial Swiss Master series and having everything in it, then this is one of those knives that you'll just need to pick up, even though it's really not that good. What is interesting, though, is it seems like this is the one that they actually made just to kind of act like a Swiss Army knife, and it's the one that seems to be the least appealing to me. It's pretty much the failure of it. The other ones were either knives that were already an existing knife in the Colonial line, or they did something really kind of unique to it, which we'll look at with a few of the other knives that we'll be looking at. But this one, like I mentioned, least appealing to me. Still a nice knife, but nowhere near as good as a real, genuine, or original Swiss Army knife.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Knife Chats, and if you did, please like and share it with your friends. Comments are always welcome. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode of Knife Chats is up online. Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.